Hey, good morning. Brenden
When
Martin here.
when Rob Browne starts shopping for your boot wear, it's scary.
Well, you're a 19 and a half size foot. It's tough to find.
Well, me and Shaq, same guy.
Yeah. Gonna get some ostrich boots, some rattlesnake,
I like
some
ostrich,
wild
soft.
boar. They
Yeah,
got some good looking wild boar boots. You'd love them.
yeah, I
Uh,
like that. I like that
yeah.
wild boar.
Yeah. Almost get wild boar is the killer.
Feral hog.
Yeah, feral hog, and it's good eating too. Hey, we got a great show today. Executive producer Brenden Martin making this happen. Rob Browne, Coach Ellis Johnson, longtime coach in the SEC Citadel grad. We'll talk some
Tom
football
Cruise.
and basketball. Hey, we talk a lot. And Franz Beard.
Tom
The
Cruise
Iron
is
Sheik.
joining us today. Oh, I mean Ellis Johnson.
Yeah, that's right. He
Same
is.
thing.
I mean,
Same thing.
Coach Ellis Johnson is a rock star, and
Yeah.
he's over in South Carolina. And bottom line is, folks, get pen and paper handy and get your phone out, take a picture of the QR code, and follow us and subscribe on X at Rob Browne _ and YouTube and Facebook. And then we put a lot of Brenden puts reels out all over. Brenden, where can people find your reels? Because you do some awesome work with editing.
I'm just going to save you on that one, Rob, because if you know what reels are, you know where to find them. Facebook,
Instagram.
YouTube, Instagram. They all got reels, Rob. Everyone's got reels. Just go to your platforms, like, follow, check it out. We're there. If you want to watch the shows on YouTube, you can check it out. SEC Sidelines Sports. All the shows are housed down on our pages. You can see them from yesterday, last week, and everything else. It ain't hard, folks. Join the program. It's free. It doesn't cost you a penny to be a part of this show.
And we got a show, the Buddy Martin Show, Monday through Thursday at 9 p.m. Eastern on this channel, and also a show with Ronnie Sanders and Doug Dean on Wednesdays at 5 p.m. Eastern with AU Undercover.
But they're not just live, Rob.
Yeah.
They're not. We're not just radio. You can watch them anytime.
Live or anytime you want to. We record live, but you can watch them at your leisure. You could be driving. Today I'll be on the road.
We've confused them now. I think.
Yeah, that's right. So
they're all like live, not live. We're live. We're everywhere. We're on 5 days a week. So there you go.
And you can find us anytime. Let's bring in Coach Ellis Johnson, and we're going to talk some football. We got spring practice about to crank up, and also coach a hot basketball race. Franz Beard will be on to talk about that, and we're going to be going back and forth. I like the football, basketball on Mondays, and we'll get more into baseball as the week goes on. But Coach, from your perspective, now it seems like they give these kids, they give them a little time off at the end of the year, like a week and a half, and then they do 2 5-week sessions in the summer. So with that being said, and I'll tell you, high schools like in Memphis, MUS, my school's biggest rival back in 2001, ended spring practice. And they told that the football players are required to either play lacrosse, participate in track and field, or both. Since then, MUS has won like 4 state championships and been a runner-up 4 or 5 times. And I think what they're saying is there's enough 7-on-7 camps already. What do you think is going to happen with these spring games based on what Southern Cal, Texas, Nebraska are doing, but also spring practice as a whole?
That's a great question because it kind of one end of the spectrum to the other. You got Texas deciding they're not going to have a spring game. On the other hand, you've got a team like Alabama, and that's one of their biggest events in the year because it's the only time where 70% of their fan base could get a shot to get in the stadium and watch them.
Yep.
So they can't get tickets regular season.
Or afford it.
That's a hard question to answer because for every school it's sort of a different situation. But what's driving this for the most part is the extended season with the playoffs and all that. Well, there are only 12 to 14 teams involved in that, and only about 3 or 4 of them play more than 1 week. So I don't know why that's such a big deal, but I understand why Sarkisian on this particular year just said, hey, it's been too long a drag for these guys. We're going to pull back this spring. And that makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah. I mean, you think about Auburn, Florida, LSU, any of these schools, the fans, I remember when I was in school, the high school recruits in the mid-'80s were being mobbed 40 years ago by autograph seekers. And people already knew who they were. This was 40 years ago. I remember kid named John Hudson out of Paris, Tennessee, had signed with Auburn. He would end up being a starter for 3 or 4 years at center. I mean, the kid came out to the A-Day game and got mobbed. And can you imagine today with all the social media from a coaching perspective? Let's look at Florida. Say Billy Napier, he's got some new coaches coming in. When a new coach comes in, if you're the coordinator, I'm just going to throw this out there. Did you like to say, let me make that hire, or let me have serious input? Or did you always have an agreement like, hey man, if he's going to be a defensive back coach or a linebacker coach and you're my defensive coordinator, you've got to sign off on it? How'd that work?
Yeah,
How should
I
it work?
think basically that last thing, the comments you said, I think the head coach should pick whoever's on his staff. I've seen situations where coaches on the staff are bringing in their buddies and telling the coach what a great coach he was, and it didn't end up working out so well.
Yep.
But I do think when you hire somebody on either side of the ball, the coordinator definitely needs to be involved in the interview process. Unless they've already worked together somewhere, you need to definitely consult them. I think most coordinators would tell you they'd like to have had a little bit of hand in the hiring of everybody in that room that's with them, because it's just going to make a better work environment, a little bit more cohesion, and everything just goes smoother. It's hard enough to win football games when everybody's pulling in the same direction. You get a couple of people in there that are doing their own thing, and you got a problem.
Yeah, and you're right. And looking at the size of these staffs, I mean, I think Florida has the biggest staff I can think of in terms of analysts and all. As a coach, when you have all these people looking at tape, and there's so many, they can even break it down by position, or say you've got 5 players on the opposition at this time of the year before spring practice kicks off, but it'll be going on in the South through late April. We know that. What advantage can you gain in mat drills and all, other than, I think, the obvious mental toughness? Because if your guys are asking for seconds in mat drills and that kind of stuff, you've got a tough team. And talent aside, everybody's got talented players. If you're not mentally tough, I think you're going to crumble when things go wrong. You heard Rick Pitino's speech at basketball recently with St. John's. That was probably 6 or 8 weeks ago, but he was like, hey, what are you guys going to do when things go wrong? The biggest mistake we're making today is saying you can't coach kids like you did 30 and 40 years ago. I think you can. You just they got to know that you're doing it to help them, not just because you can.
Yeah, some similar version of what Pitino was saying in that little talk has been given in every basketball, football team, baseball team, probably too.
Yeah,
anywhere in America. And, some similar version. And it's been going on forever. I don't think the kids are that much different now.
That's right.
But I do think all this NIL and portal can cause them to react differently. I mean, I just think that when you got a trap door, you can run out. If you don't like the way things are going, 18, 19-year-olds are more likely to take that trap door than they would be if they were 30 years old. So I think it is important, and I think it's an important part of the job. You can say it's kind of Pollyanna, but I think it's an important part of your job, especially looking back. How much you influence these kids in things other than the sport that you were teaching. Yeah. And you don't know how big of an influence you have until a 28-year-old guy calls you on the phone. You hadn't seen him in 3 or 4 years and wants to ask your advice on something that you think you say, why in the hell did he call me?
Yeah.
And I don't know what to tell him. But that's how much respect or trust that the kid had, was just to call a coach and say, Coach, I got something I need to ask you. I mean, it's just, to me, it's the most important thing that you're doing.
Well, it is. And I always told every kid in track and field and cross country I've ever coached is, once you break the 5-minute barrier on the mile, I'll get you a sack full of crystals. That's a hell of a goal. But you're right. Is there a day that goes by that you don't hear, or you don't reach out, or they don't reach out to you? Because, I mean, Brendan's grown up like I have with some pretty strong role models. And I think about coaches and teachers that helped me along the way. I still am in contact with them. I mean, I can't get enough of them.
Yeah. I mean, I don't hear from them constantly, no.
Yeah.
But it's just, sporadically you'll have one of them call you out of the blue or text you or something.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's just to BS and chitty chat.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's, they're asking a question. You're kind of surprised they ask you. Yeah. But they want your advice because they trust you.
Yeah. All right. Now, I want to ask you, going into spring practice in the SEC, based on, and I'll break it down, I'll make it easy, with Oklahoma and Texas coming in. Texas was much better prepared. We all felt that would happen than Oklahoma was. But a guy that I know, and we've had him on the show a number of times, and he texted me over the weekend, Jim Nagy, former executive director of the Reese's Pieces Mobile Senior Bowl, is the new GM at Oklahoma. And I asked him a number of times on the show, and when I'd see him, he's got a son at Auburn, and I'd say, man, you'd be a hell of a coach or some type of, you bring so much value to a college. And now he's at Oklahoma. And I don't think the average person out there understands. This guy has coached with Pete Carroll, Bill Belichick, and McCarthy, I think, with Green Bay. He's been to 6 Super Bowls, and I saw him. He got 4 Super Bowl rings. Oklahoma, could this be a seismic shift, kind of like when they discovered oil out in Clinton County, Oklahoma?
I don't know about that, but I do know that's
a
heck comparison. Of a hire. And I didn't know all that background on him, Rob. I knew a lot. Yeah. I didn't know that much. But I think, Brent's taking the defense back over. He's brought in Wesley Goodwin, who was the coordinator at Clemson, who was his right-hand man when he was at Clemson. And I think that he's going to be more involved and absorbed by the defensive stuff, and he needs somebody to take a lot of that off of him. I think they all need somebody, and you'll see that a lot of them are hiring people to do that. But it's just the nature of the thing with the NIL and the portal now. You can call them a GM or a personnel director, whatever title you want to give them, but you need that person just like an NFL team now. A coach can't handle all that stuff and work on game plans too. He'd be walking in and out of a defensive meeting 2 and 3 times a day, and that drives other coaches crazy because you can't make any progress when the guy's out of the room. You keep going, but then you got to go back over it and see if it's okay with him what you did. So he's got to have somebody to get that off of him, and I think that's going to be huge. But I also say I do think Texas had a lot better roster and depth chart coming into the season than Oklahoma did. But then Oklahoma got hit with a bunch of injuries. And that's to me what tailed off on their season so badly. Their receiver core and their offensive line were all beat up. And I think the quarterback had a terrible year mainly because of that.
Yeah, 46 sacks they gave up at Oklahoma. But, yeah, and Jim Nagy – I don't even know if he's 50 yet, but he went to school at Michigan. You talk to him, the guy's knowledge of football and finding, developing, everybody better keep their eyes on Oklahoma. And you talk about a coach coming in and out of a meeting 3 or 4 times and getting distracted. I got that speech from my wife, Audrey, this morning. She goes, I'll be talking to you and you're texting and I'm like, I'm distracted.
No.
Yeah.
No. You're serious.
Yeah. I went into
I would never have said that to you.
Yeah. I get a little distracted. But I remember back August 16th of 2018, Marcus Woodson, my friend, was on the staff at Auburn coaching defensive backs, and he brought my son Wilson, and I said, come on up to the staff meeting. Kevin Steele was in there, and Travis Williams, and all the coaches, and I went in there. Kevin Steele's there. That's a serious ass meeting when that coordinator in that big conference room, the one I'm talking about, you better be paying attention. And there was, I'll never forget, Marcus had a couple of sleeping bags in there. He's like, yeah, sometimes you're going to be here all night. So that news, what you just said about bringing in one of his guys from Clemson for his 10-year run there when they had one of the best defenses in the country, is now joining him at Oklahoma. What is his name again? Was he on the staff last year at Clemson?
Yeah, Wes Godwin was the defensive coordinator.
Yeah.
And He took over. Excuse me. He took over when Brent left, and just moved up, and did a good job this year. They just were snake bit on some things, and I think their defensive front production fell. But anyhow, he's rejoined Brent at Oklahoma. Now I don't know what his exact title is. Brent's going to call the defenses, and I think having that guy there, in addition to Nagy, that's going to take a lot of stuff off of his plate. And I think you'll see a lot of improvement on that side of the ball. But I think the biggest key, they got to stay healthy on the offensive side.
Yeah. Let's say hello to the Iron Duke, a man from Alachua County, Florida, 6'3" junior, 209 pounds. Franz Beard, GatorBaitMedia.com.
I remember 209 pounds. I remember it well. You know, just like Brenden remembers the days we were once young and good looking.
You know what? I'm like Coach Ellis Johnson over here. I'm like Tom Cruise. I just hit 208 because that was my goal for last year. Coach, you know what I'm talking about. I got my goals. I'm at 208.64, 51. Bring it, okay?
Yeah, and I'm gonna get him. Hey, I'm gonna get him a pair of wild boar boots if they've got them today. I got ostrich
ones.
Boots.
I don't want the pointy ones. Make you look.
No. These are cool. You'll love.
I want to be like Tombstone.
Hewlett and Dunn boots, man. Franz, you're one of the best writers out there, and Coach Franz has seen a lot, and the stuff Franz puts out on GatorBaitMedia.com. For a lot of people, it's show prep, and I use it every day. He sends me so much great stuff. Franz, watching some college basketball over the weekend. We're talking with Coach Johnson about spring practice. What's happening with teams? What are they trying to accomplish? Are we going to see spring practice go away at some schools? Certainly spring games are. But let's get your thoughts right now. We're going to play back. I like this ping pong, back and forth football and basketball. What you saw over the weekend, kind of 3-minute Cliff Note version of the SEC basketball race. I watched the Gators at the O-Dome, and I'm with Brenden and you. I know a lot of money spent on NIL and paying for, talent acquisition now. They got to do something with that arena. It's tired, very tired.
I mean, they took a pig and put lipstick on it and said, ain't this pretty? Well, it's prettier than it was. But the O-Dome now is the third oldest arena in the SEC. No, the fourth oldest arena in the SEC, behind Vanderbilt, Georgia, and Rupp. We needed a new one. We didn't get one. They came up with this ingenious idea to redo the O-Dome, screwed that up, had to get somebody else to come in there and help. Yeah. They had to call in the Braswell people out of Birmingham to come in.
Brasfield Gorey. Yeah.
Yep. They had to call them in to come in and take over because it had been so badly screwed up. And they won't tell you the exact price, but we spent more money than they spent on Auburn's Neville Arena. We could have had a Neville Arena or an Ole Miss Pavilion, both of which are just absolutely tremendous facilities. Auburn, you're never more than 43 feet away from the basket, from the floor.
Yeah.
And they didn't, and they could have turned the O-Dome into the practice facility, and they could have turned that into the football facility for a few $1 million. But did we do it? No, we didn't. So enough of that. Florida is, despite the fact that we play in a tired old arena, Florida does have a tremendous home court advantage there, and we saw that Saturday night. I don't know how it sounded on TV, but my ears are still ringing from it here. Florida totally destroyed Buzz Williams, and not many people do that. Buzz is as smart a coach as there is, period. And I got to tell you one other thing. One of the classiest guys anybody would ever meet. If I am the parent of a 17, 18-year-old kid who wants to play college basketball, and Buzz Williams comes to my house, when he leaves, I'm saying to my kid, this guy better be on your short list.
Yeah, correct.
He's that good. Auburn clinched the SEC. They're they've got the double bye. They've got the number 1 seed. Here's what's interesting. If Alabama loses twice this week, which is entirely possible because they get the Florida, who they're a terrible matchup with, and then they got to go to Auburn, they finish 12-6. Now, let's say, okay, Florida wins 1 out of 2. They're 13-5, or if they win both of them, they're 14-4, which I think they're going to do. That would put them in second. Tennessee has 2 cupcake games. That's 13-5 for them.
Yeah.
Missouri's got 2 winnable ball games. And guess what? Guess what Missouri has over Alabama?
A win.
The tiebreaker.
Yeah.
Alabama could finish up as the number 5 team and have to play on Thursday night.
Yeah. Friends, that's how crazy this is. Coach Johnson, you heard what he just said. The end of that Tennessee-Alabama game, the 3-pointer was really amazing. Meshack, I was out with my wife running some errands, and I had the Tennessee Vol app on there listening to our friend Bob Kessling, I can't believe he's retiring this year, but I think Mike Keith is the new voice of the Vols, but he's been part of the Vol Network forever. Coach, I want to go back here and ask your thoughts. As a coach, when you watch games, whether it's football or basketball, baseball, you're a coach, and there's a lot of psychology involved. Can you overcoach and yell and holler too much to where the guys tune you out? I think you can.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about during the game?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think sometimes, I don't know, I would say that's an indication they're not doing what you worked on in practice, or, something else is going wrong. But I think it's too late to fix it. Now, I'm not talking about adjustments or, things that you need to emphasize or whatever, but if you got to constantly, be yelling at 6 different guys out there, somebody didn't have them ready to play.
Yeah.
But, it's hard to say. Different coaches have different styles, different personalities, and different ways. And those kids have been around him a whole hell of a lot more than people on TV have, so they respond. I know when Frank Martin first got to South Carolina, and there were people who were sitting near the team in the arena, and they kept complaining about his language. And then people started talking about, there's no way he can talk to those young men that way. Do you not understand? They've been listening to that for 6 weeks before the season started. Yeah. They loved the guy.
Yeah.
He was like an older brother sometimes, the way he communicated with them. I went to a couple of his practices because I wanted to see if I could pick up some things and the way he handled players. I think you can learn from other sports. But that's just an example. I mean, most of the time, fans don't know what the hell they're talking about with the way a coach handles his play.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great observation about Frank, because I remember watching Frank Martin when he was the head coach at Kansas State before he came to South Carolina. And, man, friends, I have to go back to what you said about Buzz Williams. I love that guy. I think he's pound for pound the best coach in the SEC. Every team he's got, I'll tell you right now, watch out for him in the tournament in Nashville. Those guys they have a never say die attitude, and he's if you love coaching and you want to learn about coaching, I would say watch Buzz Williams. And then I'll tell you, cool hand Todd Golden, cool hand Luke, he's cool. He doesn't lose his cool.
He's I was around Dean Smith during the early years. He had Charlie Scott there, and Dean figured out one basic thing. You got to have your Charlie Scotts there. You got to have that guy that can nail shots from anywhere in the court. You got to have your point guard. But by golly, if you don't show up with some size, chances are you're going to get your butt kicked.
Yeah.
And Dean learned that lesson in 1970 when they made it to the NIT, and Charlie Scott, they didn't have the size to compete. They had the great Charlie Scott, but they didn't give him guys that could get him the basketball.
Yeah.
Todd has got now, when Sam Alexis gets healthy, which I think he'll be ready for the Ole Miss game, he'll have 5 guys, 2 6'9s, a guy they list at 6'10", but he's really 6'11", a guy they list at 6'11 who's 7 foot, and 7'1" Micah Hanlogton.
Yeah.
You got 25 fouls in the paint. You can defend the paint. You can tell your guys to be pit bulls out on the perimeter because you got the paint covered.
Yeah.
And this is what he's done. What he has become, and he's now, let me say one thing. He is growing into the coaching role as far as making adjustments and things like that. That takes time. I don't care. He's 38 years old.
Yeah.
You pick that up. You learn that as you go. I guarantee you, Coach Johnson can tell you right now, the coordinator that he was when he retired was just slightly better than the assistant coach that he was when he was 30 years old.
Yeah.
And this is one of the best guys. He's one of the best I ever saw at adjusting on the fly. But that comes with experience, and Todd will get that.
Yeah.
Bruce Pearl is a great example of how experience has turned him into a tremendous adjuster on the fly. But in the meantime, while you're waiting on that, you better have this roster construction part down pat.
Yeah.
When Coach Johnson was at South Carolina with Coach Spurrier, y'all built a great roster, which is why you won 40 games in 4 years and 41 games in 4 years, which had never been done at South Carolina and may never again be done at South Carolina. But it's because Steve Spurrier understands roster construction, what you got to have. He understands you got to have X number of wide receivers. You got to have X number of guys that play left tackle, X and right tackle, and then you got to have 1 or 2 guys that can play either side. It's things like that that escape, as he mentioned before. Fans haven't a clue. You're right. And these kids understand getting chewed out. They understand a few F-bombs going around. They hear that on the court every day when they're home or when they're growing up. That's nothing new to them. It's new to the fans, and the fans go ballistic.
Yeah. And friends, I just want to say, you just nailed it. Most of them don't have a clue. And it's like looking at a building under construction, 100-story building, and going, what's all that steel sticking out and poking out? And my dad being an architect, because that's reinforced concrete, boy, with rebar. The Romans invented it. It's been around a long time, but you have to, when you start understanding, and friends, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I want to go back and forth because I got 2 really smart people, a lot of brain power here. Coach, what he just said, I remember distinctly when I was in college, my last year in college, I got to work for ESPN and CBS for a lot of those games. The students, they would have us do it. So I did the Iron Bowl Friday, but I had to be there Thanksgiving Day in Birmingham in 1987. And it was the only time I'd never not eaten Thanksgiving dinner with my family. It's kind of like, welcome to the coaching world. You're going to miss a lot of stuff. So I'm down there all day driving James Browne around. I was his guy, and who's now with CBS. And we were sitting in the end zone at Legion Field looking out from the top, like 3 rows from the top. And he said, why is this rivalry so intense? And that was a cool conversation. And I was very fair. David Housel taught me, you're representing, do it right. But I also remember the next day, I got to go over to Atlanta and do the Georgia Tech game. And I was assigned to be on the sidelines right by the coaches by the parab guy holding up that circuit, picking up the sound. Oh my God. Whoa. Let's just say there were some words used. You remember the movie Christmas Story when he said, my old man had a way of weaving words and foul language that was somewhere still floating out there above Lake Michigan in the atmosphere. Man, if you, it's just part of it. But Coach, think about you're as cool, but I can also see crossing you if you're a player and you're not putting forth the effort. You would not put up with that for 2 seconds. Tell us some cool stories about, for instance, being with Gene Stallings in a game. People, he like Bob Bell said one time, when that guy walks in a room, you're in the presence of a damn good man. And I've talked to him a couple of times, never met him in person, but what did it get like? Because you did a great tour with him and the man from Epps, Alabama, Brother Oliver.
Yeah, it was kind of strange. Coach was the thing I remember most about him, I could sit here and list 1,000 things, but the thing that separated him from most coaches I worked for was his consistency. I remember, a lot of people don't remember now, we first came in there, we were 0-3.
Yep.
Okay. And we beat Vanderbilt to get a win. So thank God we used to walk around and say, thank God for Vandy. But we were 0-3 now.
Yep.
Our practice method never changed. And the way he handled players never changed. And 2 or 3 years later, we had won, was it 31 in a row and 34 unbeaten?
Yep.
And he just was the same guy. I'm talking about the same guy in the way he handled the players, the way he handled a team meeting, the way we practiced. Didn't hardly ever change much. And I think a lot of younger coaches, and even some other coaches, they overreact. When you play good, they pull back too much. And when you play bad, they berate the hell out of you. And it just you got a football team that's constantly going up and down. Mm-hmm. But, that was the thing that I guess it jumped out at me. A good funny story, I coached at Alabama, and then I went to Clemson for 3 years, and I went back to Alabama. When we were there the first time, Bill was calling the defenses, and he and I were in the box. God. Jeff Rousey was sending the signals, our linebacker coach.
Yeah.
And, everybody likes to talk about Brother B or Mike Dubose, and Jeff Rousey was a hell of a football coach and recruiter. And he'd worked with Coach Bryant in his younger years, and I'm sure that's where he learned it. But anyhow, Coach Stallings wouldn't wear headphones. And so he'd be walking the sidelines, and when that call would come down, he'd be pulling on Jeff's sleeve. What's the call, man? What's the call? So, and he'd be, brother, he wants the call. He said, tell him I ain't made the damn call. I'm waiting on the personnel. And Jeff would say, brother, give me the call.
You know what? That reminds me of
Red. Brother's telling Jeff to tell him something that brother wasn't about to damn tell him himself.
Yeah.
So anyhow, I'll go to Clemson for 3 years, and I come back, and we're talking about how we're going to organize things and whether I'm going to be down on the field. I was a coordinator when I came back. And am I going to be on the sideline or the box? And we talked about it a little bit. And Rousey said, look, I'd just like to request one thing. He said, I'd like to get in the box for once, and you get on the sideline. He said, I'm so tired of Coach pulling on my sleeve, I couldn't even walk straight. I said, Jeff, he isn't here. He's retired. I just need a break, man.
Oh, that's
you know something that reminds me so much of Spurrier with Red Wilson. Red Wilson says Spurrier's on the sideline. He says, what's the play call, Coach? And Spurrier says, touchdown, Coach, touchdown.
Touchdown. Hell, I was talking hearing a speech one time, and from Pat Dye, and he said Auburn was playing in Tallahassee in 1984 against Florida State. It was a great game. I didn't get to go because I had a big econ test on Monday. I don't think it mattered that I stayed away because it was a brutal test. But I'll never forget, Coach Dye said, he goes, before the game, they always let the officials dress in the visitors' locker room. And it wasn't much of a locker room at old Doak Campbell. And he said, Bobby Skelton was the official. And I'm in there talking to him before we went out on the field. And Bobby Skelton's putting on some garnet and gold socks. And I was like, we ain't got a chance. But think about it. But you know what? Let me say something real quick about one of our sponsors, because history, traditions, and heroes, man, the great writers, the coaches. And I hang on every word. Buddy Martin always says, nobody wants to hear what I have to say. Yeah, they do. It's solid gold. I want to say something about one of our sponsors, Winter Timber Outdoors in Athens, Alabama. Proud to have them as a sponsor. They're growing in the footprint that is the Southeastern Conference and all the shooting sports right now. Turkey season is upon us. Get out there, practice, get those number 4, number 5 copper plated 3.5 lead shot. Migra makes a great turkey load. You can buy Migra ammunition at Winter Timber Outdoors. All the camo patterns, the ground blinds, the decoys, everything you need, box calls, the slate calls. You can use the mouth calls, the diaphragm calls. Bottom line is, turkey hunting is tough. Takes skill, takes patience. If a turkey could smell like you can hear and see, it's already like chasing a ghost. You never get one. But get yourself into Winter Timber Outdoors. They got a new store under construction in Auburn. Should be opening by June. They're looking in Athens. They're looking in Fayetteville. They're looking in the Memphis market. We'll have an announcement on that soon. Winter Timber Outdoors, folks. Great people to work with. Open every day of the week in Athens, Alabama. Franz, what he's just saying about the coaches and the average person, I think people wonder, should a coach be in the box? Should he be on the sidelines or whatever? There's so much going on the sidelines in football game. Then you look at basketball. And I don't know. I think there's a lot of people like you, Franz. I think football is your sport. I think basketball is your sport. If I had to guess, I think you'd rather be sitting at a baseball game, eating a hot dog and drinking a cold beer, hams preferably. But there's nothing better to go to than baseball. But what Coach just said about some head coaches don't wear headsets, some do. Mm-hmm. Steve Spurrier, I don't know him. You do. Y'all both do. But he exudes confidence when you're around him, and consistency. That's the most important thing Coach Johnson just said. And you see that in coaches. Why don't they all try to do that?
Well, here's the problem as I see it. The head coach, people say, well, that head coach has an ego that could apply for statehood. If you don't have an ego that could apply for statehood, you have no business being the head coach at a place like Alabama or Florida or South Carolina or any place in the Southeastern Conference. You better have that ego, number one. Number two, you better have good people around you and so forth like that. And you better be confident enough to bring in people around you that you can allow to coach. Steve Spurrier, I guarantee you, let Ellis Johnson coach the defense, and he may have had a suggestion or two here or there based on something he's seeing that triggers a play that maybe he knows can't be stopped unless it's done a certain way. But other than that, I doubt Coach Spurrier ever asked you more than maybe once or twice a game, have you done this or have you done that? If that many times. Yeah. Steve let you coach. And great coaches let their assistant coaches coach. And that's the part that separates the good ones from the great ones from the bad ones. Yeah. You better have that monumental ego, but you also better have the confidence in yourself that you can let other people do stuff. We had a guy here named Ron Zook, and Zooker is a great guy. He's a very knowledgeable football guy. But if you ever went to a Florida practice when Zooker was here, I mean, he's over here at the defensive line. The next thing you know, you watch him, and he's in a dead sprint over to where the wide receivers are. It's like he's over there. He's over there. It's like he's going like that with his hair. And next thing you know, he's sprinting over to someplace else. I mean, I bet the guy did 30,000 steps at every practice because he's sprinting to one place or the other. What happens? Steve leaves him a team that's got 26 future NFL guys on it. And what do? They go 8-5. The next year they go 8-5. The next year they go 7-5. Now, how did that happen with all that talent? Plus, you look at the talent he brings in. That 20 of those guys are starters for Urban Meyer in 2006 when he wins the national championship. So why did Zucker fail and why did Urban succeed? And it's not a case necessarily of Urban Meyer knew more stuff than Ron Zook. The case is that Urban Meyer, with his ego, and now he knew stuff, certainly, let his assistants coach the game.
Okay. Yeah. Coach Johnson, what he just said, and I can tell you just in business world, if somebody's pencil whipping you and micromanaging you all the time, that doesn't show much confidence. My good friend Maury Gaston said when he turned 16, he asked his father, he said, I'll be 16 Friday. Can I drive to Athens for the Auburn, Georgia game? His father said, son, let me think about it. The next day, he said, you can do that. But I want you, when you get there, to call and tell us you've made it. And he said, before I even called, there were 10 people from Sylacauga that were calling my dad saying, hey, we saw Maury up here. So people are watching you. But it was a vote of confidence that his dad gave him. I want you to tell us also, Franz just put it so brilliantly and laid it out. In the practice, Bill Oliver said one time, he said, we got 3 hours allotted for practice. He said, but if we get done in an hour and 15 minutes, we're out of there. We're not going to just stick around. There's a term in swimming, just go too far, garbage yardage. Once you've done what you've got, did you have a written down to the minute plan for practice every day of what you wanted to accomplish? And if you got through early, hey man, let's just go play around, get out of here early. How did you do it?
No, I think when you've got that many people involved,
yeah,
that large of a structure, you got to be organized.
Yeah.
Because, and I'm not talking about nitpicking and berating.
Sure.
I'm talking about before you go out there, you got it all on paper. Every coach knows how long he's got with his kids, how long he's going to be expected to be over here and pass perimeter, how long he can go down there and work one-on-one versus the O-line, D-line, or whatever. And you start screwing with that, and now you're really micromanaging your coaches, which you meant not to do.
Yeah.
So I never liked that. But I'll tell you funny, when we were getting ready to play Wofford at Carolina, with South Carolina, and of course, they run the wishbone. I mean, it's some really unusual stuff. Mm-hmm. We're having to put more time in it. Our kids have got we're almost not even running our base defense. So Steve was like that. Now, if everything hit in practice, he didn't make them repeat. If it was good, it was good. And I remember looking in our last team period, and I remember glancing, and here comes the offense jogging across the offensive field. He's getting ready to call it all up. And we had screwed up about 50 things against that Wofford offense. And I said, Coach, we're not done. He said, you got it a minute or two? I thought, God damn it. And the next day it rained. And we didn't have an indoor facility back then.
Yeah.
And we don't even get out on the field. We were up in the deck of the stadium doing walkthroughs. So I just knew we were going to look like a bunch of idiots out there on Saturday. But now Steve would do that sometime. One time before I got there, my real close friend Brad Long, our defensive line coach, came from North Carolina. And he was at South Carolina, on that staff a year before I got there. And so he goes back home to see his family. They had not moved yet. And he comes back on Monday, and it's a beautiful day, and they're supposed to start spring practice that next weekend or whatever. And everybody's running around the building like the fire's on. He said, what's going on? He said, we're going to practice today. And And everybody's trying to get ready. He said, we don't practice today. He said, we're going to start Friday. They said, coach just said it was too good of a day to pass up. He said, we're going to practice today.
Oh, God.
They're running around trying to, I started thinking about when I came to work with Coach, I was an older, experienced coach. And I as soon as it started, I was kind of like, man, this is different. But I tell you what, I also learned from it. And I probably had an advantage as an older coach. Games don't go like you plan. Okay. So if you make everything comfy and organized and ABC during the week, and something goes different on Saturday, a lot of people panic. But I think a lot of his method in the madness sometimes is switching up practice or switching up schedule. You better be ready to adapt, and you better get it done. I don't care if he gives you 5 hours to get it done or 5 minutes. Get it done.
Yeah. Well,
one of the things I also remember about him, Florida's about to play Tennessee. And it used to be, as you know, Florida, Tennessee, third game of the season, and whoever won the SEC. That used to be the way it was. Florida's about to play Tennessee, and it's just during and there's an off week between it. It was actually week 4, this third game, and there's an off week before it. And Spurrier takes Bobby Stoops over to Crescent, and they're sitting out there. And this is a true story. They're sitting out there in the Atlantic Ocean on inner tubes just soaking up the sun. And Spurrier says, "Stoopsy, you think they're having fun like this up there in Knoxville today?"
Well, I think you can worry is the absence of faith. I've heard that said many times. And if you're prepared for the moment when you get there and you've trained hard to be hard, you'll be ready. I think also a lot of levity and kind of having fun. It better be fun. If you're going to work people really hard, it better be fun. And let me say something about Landers Ford, Memphis.com. We got 2 of the best on here right now. Coach Ellis Johnson, Franz Beard, GatorBetMedia.com. Landers Ford open Monday through Saturday, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Get out there. Brand new cars, trucks, SUVs, also a big pre-owned selection as well. Got a huge lot. Poplar and Houston Levy in Collierville, right there on the corner. I don't know of a bigger, cleaner lot. The service department will pick you up and provide transportation to and from. If they're working on your vehicle, they'll pick you up at your house, at your office, wherever. They got a lot of stuff going on, opportunities to save big on cars, trucks, and SUVs now. Ask for our good friend Brad Bellamy, the general manager, a genuinely great guy. Big Alabama and Memphis fan, loves his sports, joins us on Fridays. Love having him on. He's really into this. Go out there, have a great experience. If you didn't buy your last car, truck, or SUV from Landers, you probably paid too much. And place I'll be heading to later today, Hewlett and Dunn Boot and Clothing Company on the historic square in Collierville, Tennessee. It's easy to get to if you live in Memphis in the Mid-South, but you can also go online, hewlettandunn.com. They have a huge selection of men's and women's boots. Like I said, I got Audrey a pair for Valentine's of ostrich boots. They've got rattlesnake. They've got, you name it, wild boar. They've got large selection of luggage from Filson, STS, and a big 50% off sale going on now with Pendleton, Schaefer, Devil Dog Jeans, Wrangler, Ariat. They've got Barber. They have duck heads, huge selection of duck heads out there. You won't find duck heads anywhere like this. As many blazers, jackets, pullovers, pants, all that. Hewlett and Dunn open Monday through Saturday, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. Guys, Coach, you talked about the mental part of it. And to get back into spring practice, we got this hot basketball race going on right now. And it is to me, I love all sports if they're keeping score. They're all competitive. If you had to think about teams in the SEC And I want to ask you too about Clemson. You know that program well. You got a son as a preferred walk-on on that team. How long does it take a coach? This is going to be year 4 for Billy Napier at Florida.
Yeah.
If we have this mentality now, 2 or 3 years, everybody's panicking and freaking out. I think we're starting to see what happens when you give a coach a little time to do what he's got to do. You can have success. Do you think I'm right, or no? Everybody's, because I think it costs too much to make these changes. And again, if you were building a business yourself, it takes time.
Yeah, I think we used to talk about this all the time. It's immediate satisfaction culture we're in today and all that good stuff. But really what caused a lot of that was the amount of money the coaches started making about 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And, somebody asked Fulmer why he got fired at Tennessee. And he said it was that new contract the SEC cut. But money allows people to make changes that they may not make. And so I do think with all the money going to the players now, you might see some programs a little bit less trigger happy, if you will. Yeah. But I think what an athletic director, if that's who's making the call, they have to look at how recruiting's going. Do we have a bunch of problem out in the streets every other day? Are the kids doing a pretty good job in the classroom? Do they have a good reputation on campus with professors that they try and all this? When all of those things are in place, you need to be careful about firing a coach on nothing but a win-loss record. Yeah. And there are things like injuries and all this stuff. I mean, if you just look at the difference in playing with Lagway and not playing with Lagway, you start to understand there's certain things that the players control and you can't control. And like kind of what Fran said earlier about basketball talent and having your structure of your roster, and you got to have some size, yada, yada. You got to have those things in place in football too.
Yeah.
And quarterback can't be great if he ain't protected and he doesn't have a decent running game to help him, and he doesn't have good targets out there. Yeah. And it's just too many examples of it. So I think you're exactly right. Doesn't mean anything's going to change about people's attitudes. Yeah. They're going to always get mad when they lose. And in football, it's a do or die game every week because you don't have but 11, maybe 12 to play. Yeah. And in baseball and basketball, you can lose 3 or 4 games, be the national champion. You lose 4 games in football, and you might have to shut the program down. Yeah, so it's a whole different deal. But I think Florida made a good decision, and that's just one example. But it's the one we're talking about right now. I think maybe you will see a little bit more of that in the future. I'm personally been a coach. I hope so.
Yeah, look at Frank Beamer, guys, what it took for him to build Virginia Tech. John Thompson at Georgetown in basketball. God, they didn't think he could coach. Dean Smith at North Carolina, Coach K at Duke. I think this House settlement, the $21 million deal, might, in a roundabout way, be what keeps people from pulling the trigger so quickly, Franz. And I'm building this show. It doesn't happen overnight that you're the best show on the planet. You have to work the process. But if all you're thinking about is winning right now and not following the process, or if you want to make all the money right now and you're not doing all the little things that you got to do to get it, it ain't going to happen, Franz. And you write about this so well. But you hear, look, you pick the school. We got to fire them. You're out of your mind. Ask if that's how you'd want to be treated in your own personal life or your personal business. Because if you did it that way, the guy that invented the O-Dome, the air-supported domes, you know why that happened? He was designing a project in Osaka, Japan, a memorial to World War II, people that died in the war. They ran out of money. You know what the people in the project said to these engineers? You better figure something out. So they took a conveyor that blew air and pointed it up and stretched material out and created the air-supported domes. That guy, David Geiger, went back to Syracuse, and then he built the Carrier Dome and later the O-Dome, which you're very proud of today.
No,
Go
I'm
ahead,
not.
Franz.
No, I'm not.
Brenden said he loves it.
You drive in, you coming in from the south on Paynes Prairie, on 441,
Yeah.
and you see over there on the left, and it looks like the mothership has landed if it's at night. It's ridiculous. Here's the thing that Coach just said. We have gotten in this attitude that if we're not winning now, we got to make a change now, and patience has gone. I don't know where it's gone, but there's not many places that still have some. And it's a necessity. If I'm a parent, I want my kid to go someplace where there is stability. I don't want to go to someplace where there's a revolving door. Nick Saban, one of the biggest reasons Nick Saban was so successful for so long was that he was there. There was a constant at the head there running the program. He had a culture built. This is the one thing that Florida allowed Billy Napier to do, was build a real culture. How many guys have you seen on the arrest blotter at Florida? You haven't. And that's something, they don't care up at Georgia, Oh, he shot 14 people, but only 12 of them died. What the hell? At Florida, a kid getting arrested for not paying his parking tickets gets all over the news, and it's considered a big deal. Cultures are different everywhere. You got to allow your coach to build his culture, and you got to allow him to win. I still can't believe the Aggies paid Jimbo $75 million not to coach. He's over at Eagle Run up in north of Tallahassee now, just having a good old time, playing golf, having fun. He does a podcast now on ESPN, and he just has a good old time. Wants to coach again, and guess what? His payout allows him. He can go coach anywhere he wants to, and it doesn't matter because there's no offset with the buyout. Yeah. But $75 million, I mean, the Aggie, goodness, I mean, I realize that only the Longhorns and God have more money than the Aggies, but $75 million is a heck of a lot of money. I mean, that's what Steve was paying Coach Johnson. I know that, but that's okay.
Well, I mean, I think, it's really cool to hear this from both of y'all, but if you're building a business, I mean, you pick the person out there, and go look at Paul Tudor Jones. He is a very smart man. Went to my school in Memphis. Went to UVA. He's a hedge fund manager. Lives up in Connecticut. I'd say he's worth well over $6 billion now. And 1987, when in October of '87, October 22nd, I think 1987. The market went down about 22% in one day. And he was on the right side on some bets, and he's a commodities guy and investor. But think about how long it took him to get there. Look in the investment world. We tend to think that all these wealthy people we see on TV, or in the case of coaches, you think about the coaches making all this money, but you don't remember, Coach Johnson, you do, when they were paying you $15,000 or $20,000 a year to coach, and you worked your way up through the system. As Chuck Oliver always says, I've been 19 and I've been 57. You've only been 19. I think the amount of money, both of y'all have talked about it. I think kind of that's the takeaway from today's show is, you know what? Maybe we should start giving these guys that we thought were so good as much time as we would want if we were building a program. You know early on if a guy can or can't coach, but when he starts getting more support and he's starting to win and build, Coach, maybe they ought to be consultants that come in like you who have coached to a school that's saying, hey, we're ready to pull the trigger after 2 years, and you could advise them, because I think it might pay off big for programs. Too much money's being wasted. We already are seeing that.
Yeah, well, that last point, I was getting ready to say that you have to have an athletic director who knows something about sports.
Yeah.
Well, I hope they've coached before.
That always helps.
If they're going, I mean, I think it's also important that they know the business world today too, obviously. But if you don't know sports, you can't make a good evaluation of whether the thing is on the right track.
Yeah.
And then you tend to just look over there at the win-loss record. And if there's 3 losses, maybe might go 1 more year. If it's 4, we're going to fire him. And you don't look at anything else that's going on in there, because you really don't know what to look for. And that happens too often. But in that case, it might be a good idea, Rob, if you have a guy who's a tremendous business mind and he's a great athletic director in many ways, he may need 2 or 3 confident, people in confidence that he always consults, whether they hired them or not, and ask them, what do you see in this program? We're getting a lot of buzz from the fan base, and I don't want to make a rash decision. And I have somebody he can trust, to look at it and tell him, hey, this thing's in pretty good shape. You're about 2 players away from knocking the top out of it. But, it's just, I don't know. It's so much pressure and so much money.
Well, you do know, and you were right. It's like my dad always says, if he's doing a painting, he'll show it to certain people, and they'll rip it to pieces or they'll like it. But he says, boy, there are a few things in life uglier than a half-finished painting. And I would say that applies also, guys, to Phyllis Diller in the morning. No, I'm kidding. But you think about as you're building a football program, how maybe 2 or 3 years in, I mean, let's just look at Florida as an example, or Alabama. That first 3 games in 1990, y'all were 0-3, lost to Southern Miss. All of a sudden you hit your groove and you started winning. And I remember after Florida beat Alabama in 91 in the Swamp, like 38-0 or something like that, Alabama proceeded to pull off 28 consecutive victories.
31.
31. Okay. And and I remember
counting.
But I remember David Deuce Palmer out of Birmingham Jackson Olin going around in to tie it up, because we were watching it. We were all inside a J&M bookstore after the Auburn, Florida game in 93, watching that game. But friends, you're writing, and you have the ability to put all this stuff in the vernacular. Coach just did it. I think we're on to something. And we'll wrap up here in a minute. But bringing in some coaches and saying, hey, look, you've been in this guy's shoes. I'm an athletic director. I've never coached, but I know business and I know sports. Maybe we will get to the point where we do this, friends, because it would pay off to do it, I think, in some cases, maybe many cases.
Well, here's the thing: is we've got to get some common sense injected, and I know that's a tough thing to add. It, nobody wants that. Nobody wants to do stuff common sense, but we got to get some common sense back into coaching and running athletic departments. Rob, you made an interesting point about athletic directors who don't know anything about the game, who never played the game. You got to have an athletic director who's first off is a businessman.
Yeah.
But secondly, you got to have an athletic director that's smart enough to hire people who did play the game.
Yeah.
And let them make decisions about it. I'm surprised at the number of athletic departments. You got a guy at the top who may be a really, really fine guy. He may know the business and everything, that has not hired a football guy underneath him to tell him what's going on with football, and a basketball guy to know what's going on with that. I always thought that Ray Tanner at South Carolina was outstanding because he had been a coach. He was a baseball coach, yes, but when he was coming up the ranks and still, I was a high school coach first and everything like this. He used to coach a little bit of football. He knew something about it. but he's also smart enough to know this. Get me a basketball guy that can tell me about the basketball. Get me a football guy. I got Coach Spurrier. What do I need a football guy for?
Yeah.
But you got to surround yourself with good people. And this is the common sense element that I see missing. Auburn hired a guy named Alan Green. Alan Green was absolutely the most clueless individual I've ever seen, because he believed somebody had imparted this wisdom on him, that he knew everything about everybody and nobody else could tell him anything.
That's right.
And look what happened then. The one thing that he did do that I will say was successful was he left Bruce Pearl alone.
Yeah.
But he tinkered with football and he didn't know a thing about football.
Yeah.
And he had nobody advising him about it.
Yeah.
And we see too many athletic departments like that.
Yeah. And I can tell you this, in the securities business, we had a guy on the trading floor. He was the fixer, like the guy, the wolf in Pulp Fiction. And he'd been met by the majority owner of our company. She met him in New York at a conference, and he came down. He was from Brooklyn. He was Italian. The guy could fix anything, but he had that experience. And whenever something went wrong or we needed help, he'd come out there and he would just calm everybody down. And that's why I think I would want to have an advisory panel. I've always had an advisory panel of clients, because if you ask a client for an idea or a recommendation, 10 years later, when you're talking to them, they're going to bring it up. How that idea worked out, because they're going to bring it up every time. But you need to listen. Like when I first got in the business as a financial advisor, Jim Vance, rest his soul, told me, anytime you send a piece of mail out, you sign your signature in the upper left-hand corner, on that envelope. They'll know it's from, okay, so that guy must know me, as opposed to just a standard print. So, hey, awesome show today for executive producer Brenden Martin, Coach Ellis Johnson, Franz Beard, GatorBetMedia.com. Boy, I'll go back and watch these. I got to be on the road today. I'll be listening. But I love the back and forth football, basketball. But more than anything, it's the wisdom of these two guys that you take away. And, man, we live in the greatest country in the history of the world. Don't ever forget it.
Rob?
Yeah.
It's so much fun. I love being on here with Franz. We kind of come out of the same era.
Yeah.
But he hurt my feelings the other day when he was talking about coming up from Savannah to watch the Bulldogs at the Citadel, Bazemore and AJ and Dotson. And he did not mention this vicious, dominating left outside linebacker on that team. It hurt my feelings.
Well, Gene Dotson, I got to tell you what, Gene Dotson, you played with him, unbelievable guy. And Bazemore, they were on I know we got to go, but Benedictine goes 9-1, only lost to Groves their senior year. And Groves had Andrew Johnson, who you also played with on that team.
God,
but
incredible.
Benedictine's offensive line, their biggest guy, weighed 165 pounds.
Wow.
Jim Walsh was out there out of Columbus, Georgia, Baker High School. He came over there, and he had these little guys that he convinced them. He says, you got to be ankle biters. You got to be chihuahuas. You got to go in there, bite them by the ankles, and they'll hate you.
Yeah, I mean, that's the only way to do it. I mean, tough times don't last forever, but tough people do. And also the memory, I don't know what both of y'all take. I think it's a lot of exercise and a lot of activity, but y'all are sharper than most 25 and 30-year-olds I know. And I mean, every time I'm on here, I'm blown away, because bottom line, I learn a lot, man. Hey, God bless y'all all. Watch the show, share the show. We'll get these guys back on here with us next week. We'll see you tomorrow, same time on the channel. Great job. Have a great day. Appreciate you watching.